Hi everybody, Rob Geese here doing a quick video review for Quantum Break. The game came out Tuesday. I published my full written review early that morning on ScreenRant.com. I had finished the game and written the review over the weekend, but I wanted to save it for when the actual game hit store shelves. The video is as per usual on my channel a few days late. I was in Atlanta getting a bit of a sunburn and while visiting the set of Edgar Wright's new film Baby Driver, and I'm hopefully in like a year from now I can actually talk about that. I can only say that I was there and got a sunburn. I promised I would do a video review to some of my friends, so it is 3:15 in the morning. I got back around midnight, so here I am. Quantum Break. This game, what do I say about this game? I kind of fucking love this game. I have not been pulled in as engaged or as captivated by a video game story like Quantum Break in years. I don't even know what to compare it to. Like I'm trying to think of another game where I was so drawn in and addicted to seeing what happens next, purely based on story. And I don't know what the last time. It must be maybe the first Mass Effect, which is like 2007. Anyways, Quantum Break. If you don't know anything about it, is a time travel story. It's advertised a lot as being a cool like third person cover based shooter with powers, but thankfully, it's not very much of that because the gameplay is the worst part of this game. But the combat scenarios, which I'll talk more about in detail in a second, are thankfully few and far between because the real gameplay is sort of engaging with the story and experiencing it. That means a lot of walking around and just talking with other characters and finding. I hate to say collectibles because I hate collecting collectibles, but the collectibles are minimal in how many there are. And what they actually are narrative objects. So reading a computer, a tablet, or just turning on a radio and you're hearing specific things. And through that, you learn a lot of the backstory and a lot of the little connections between what's happening. So let's back this up a little bit. It's a time travel tale. And the game begins like this. You're playing protagonist Jack Joyce, played by Shawn Ashmore of X-Men fame. And the game begins with him through voiceover. You hear him sort of narrating the beginning of the story. You can tell he's having a conversation with someone, like he's being interrogated or something, and has to explain what happened. And the story begins in modern day. It's set in a few months from now, I guess October 2016. And Jack has come back to his hometown where he hasn't been in many years. He grew up there. His brother is still there, but they've kind of disconnected. But he came back to town to visit one of his best buddies he grew up with, who he hasn't seen in many years either, named Paul Serene. Paul is played by Aidan Gillen of Game of Thrones fame and many other cool projects. And you come back to Riverport University. It's like this fictional town, fictional university. And you're going to and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning. It's crazy, crazy late. And you're walking through the campus. So you start at the front gates, you walk in, and there's like junk everywhere because there's been like a student protest and it's still sort of going on but winding down, and so there's tents and garbage and like cardboard signs and stuff, and a bunch of students are protesting this mega corporation called Monarch Solutions, and they become sort of like the central pillar of the story. And as you talk, you can talk to some of the students to kind of learn what's going on and meet some important characters there. But what you're really trying to do is get to the research area where your buddy Paul is, and that's the Aidan Gillen character, and it's a young Aidan Gillen, and that'll make sense in a second. So you meet him, and you kind of reconnect, and he says, you'll learn more about this later, but there's a special bond between the two. They trust each other because of something that happened when they were kids. Anyways, it seems like Paul's like research project is running out of money or something, or there's like deadlines they can't meet, or investors are questioning what he's doing, or his experiment might not be the most legal thing to do. So Paul's called you in to help him kind of just test it, do a live human test, because Paul knows for sure this thing is going to work. You don't know what it is yet, though. He kind of walks you through it. You get to see a little presentation, and you go into this very cool room with wires everywhere and servers and the computers and all this shit. And there's this weird object in the middle, and then you turn it on, and the object surrounds itself with these metal panels, forming like a little corridor, and you can kind of walk into it. And it's a fucking time machine, right? So this is your introduction to like how time works in this game. And you're about to turn it on, and then something goes wrong, as as things do in any time travel story. And just as they do, and just as you learn that the time machine didn't exactly work as planned, there's a miscalculation somewhere or something. At that very moment, heavily armed dudes just come in, and they are from, you guessed it, Monarch Solutions, the weird, sketchy mega corporation you're slowly learning more about. And your buddy Paul is stuck in the time machine. So he's like, fuck it, the only way out is to go in. So he goes in the time machine, and you get rescued by your brother, who's played by Dominic Monaghan, from one of the Hobbits from Lord of the Rings and from Lost. And I think you Flash Forward as well, another TV show. A lot of TV actors in this. And so you escape with your brother, but because you were there when the experiment went wrong, this is where the time powers come in. You got subjected to these things called chronon particles, and that's explained in the game. All the timey-wimey shit, and then the science part of it is explained in game. So you and Paul both come out with time powers, except you don't know what happened to Paul. He went to the machine, and who knows where he came out. But you do very quickly learn that the leader of Monarch Solutions, and this isn't a spoiler to say because it's straight up front in the marketing and trailers, the leader of Monarch Solutions is Paul, but the older Paul from the future. So clearly the time machine did work as intended, because Paul somehow went back in time and is now way older, like twice as old as you. He looks like real life Aidan Gillen, which is brilliant casting. So you get to see young Paul and old Paul, young Aidan Gillen, old Aidan Gillen. And then from there, the stuff you learn what this is actually about. And turns out by activating this time machine, whatever mistakes may have happened with that process has created a fracture in time. And so these stutters are happening all over the world near where this experiment happened. And in stutters are basically like a pocket area, like a physical space where time has just stopped. But they're growing in size and frequency and popping up everywhere. And this is kind of like the end of the world scenario. And everyone involved is sort of trying to prevent or is very worried about the end of time. And at first you're like, what the hell does that mean? But I'm telling you, the beauty of this game is every weird question, character introduction, or happening, or thing that doesn't really connect or make sense, it all will. The way the Quantum Break story is so brilliant because it peels back layers and layers and layers and has sort of twists and turns because it's a non-linear narrative because you're dealing with time travel. And of course, the big marketing gimmick of this game is how it uses a live-action television show. And so the game, it's I should say up front, it's developed by Remedy Entertainment, the makers of the original Max Payne games, the first two games, and Alan Wake. And by the way, I love Quantum Break, and that's coming from someone who did not like Alan Wake at all. I could not stick with that game; didn't work for me. I did dig Max Payne though, but for the action. But this game sold me on the story alone. So that brings me to the structure of the game. Like Alan Wake, Quantum Break is broken down into segments. So the game's spread over 5 acts. Within each act, there's three parts or levels. But between each act, you get a full half-hour TV show. So there's 4 episodes, one between each act, and you get to see a different perspective on the things that are happening. And that's kind of a weird... I see some reviews sort of complaining about this, but for me, it totally worked. So like I said, you're playing Jack Joyce and dealing primarily with Paul and some of the other supporting characters. But the TV show primarily follows other supporting characters, so you don't really see much, or in some cases at all, in-game. But it works out in a very smart way because you're basically following employees of Monarch Solutions, like some of the good guys. But the things they do in the live-action show are directly setting up things you're dealing with as the player in-game. And there are in-game pre-rendered, not CG, but like using in-game graphics, story bits as well. And also, before you get to see the 30-minute live-action episode, you sort of switch gears and take control of the Paul Serene character, the old Aidan Gillen character. And since his powers are a little different than Jack's powers are all trying to enhance gameplay. So we can stop time with these time blasts. You can kind of slow down time and run really fast. Use that to dodge bullets and stuff like that. I'll talk more about gameplay in a second. But Paul's powers, at least one of his powers, is sort of he can see into the future. And again, that's explained in game as well. So he gets to make this decision point at the end of each act, and that sort of changes. It doesn't have major changes, but it does in some respects. It sort of changes what you're going to see in the live-action TV show, but more importantly, it changes some of the characters you will see and not see in other things in the gameplay as well. It's a little weird, but I kind of like it because it gives you a reason to replay those junction points, as they're called. Um, but anyways, playing Paul's perspective and getting his thinking and the thinking of like the high level guys at Monarch, playing the main game as protagonist Jack Joyce and him dealing with his brother and his friends and all other people and getting caught up in the situation and trying to be the hero, and then getting the live action TV show. Plus, all the narrative objects you pick up, like it all connects beautifully. And there are some characters that I really didn't like or I didn't really understand, but their motivations become clear later on. And it's very, very smart. I can see why this game was delayed over and over again and why the main character was recast, because they needed some, I don't want to say big name talent to sell it, but they definitely needed some big name talent to deliver the story bits. And they got a really great cast. And the story comes together beautifully. But what I really dig about it as a cool time travel, and we're seeing time travel everywhere nowadays. There are so many TV shows that are dealing with time travel. 12 Monkeys, even like Legends of Tomorrow, the Flash spinoff. But this one has a very cool like scientific explanation for what's happening. All the little blueprints and details you see of how they construct these time machines and how they're used, and the rules, that's the most important thing. There are rules to how this time travel works. I'm not going to spoil it here. But their explanation of how this works and how you unravel that in the game and the rules and consequences of that are fucking cool and in many ways brilliant. There are so many movies out there that deal with time travel, but I don't think I've seen any that are really, maybe Primer is another good example, but there's nothing's been as cool or as well told as this. And how they use that to kind of explain some of the crazy set pieces. And that's another highlight of the game. Story, epic. But because of these rifts or the fracture, and you're getting these stutters, you're getting these incredible visually designed set pieces where like a bridge has exploded and everything's just stuck. And you have to kind of traverse your way through this maze of pieces and flying cars and debris. Genius. And that's the kind of gameplay part that's good, because you're sort of like exploring this beautifully rendered environment and dealing with like the urgency. And that's another thing. This game deals with like that sense of urgency and immersion so very well because of how it's presented. So yeah, the gameplay has some puzzly type areas where you're using your powers or time powers to kind of, how do I say this? Bypass obstacles that are really fucked up because of these stutters. Because sometimes you can be in this like zero state area where everything's frozen, but some pieces aren't, and they're like going back, like flashing back and forth really quickly, like an exploding car. It keeps re-exploding over and over again. So the only way to get past that is to like freeze that, at least for a few seconds, and then use another power to kind of boost your way through it. So there's kind of cool puzzles like that, and moving objects and trying to get over things. The other part of the gameplay, and this happened very early in the game, so as soon as you begin Act 2, you're forced into your first like gunfight, and like literally forced. There's no stealth way around it. You can't use your time powers in some interesting ways to kind of get past it. It's just like, these Monarch guys are bad, kill them all. And that's the only way you can proceed. And you have to kill everyone. And then when you kill that final guy, you get this weird slow motion sequence. And as soon as I have to use a gun, it just like, it like crushed my heart, because it was so arcade-like in a bad way that didn't fit the rest of the game. I went from like brilliant, sort of intriguing story and moving around and no combat at all, just like cool dialogue. And then now you're playing this really shitty, rudimentary, dated third-person shooter. I played it on the Xbox One, so maybe that's part of it. But like I said, it's a third-person cover shooter, but you don't actually stick to cover. So like when your character automatically kind of crouches down when near cover, but the shooting mechanics just feel goofy and cheap, and you can see like those yellow-white lines, sort of like you could in Max Payne. But it doesn't really fit here. It looks sort of cheap. And then you can have two secondary weapons too, which you kind of select with the D-pad. But the weapons, like, the animations are missing when you put a gun down or pull one out, or if you, like, turn and try to pull the weapon. So it just felt, like, so unpolished and tacked on. That's probably the best descriptor of it. The whole gunplay combat stuff is tacked onto the game. It's almost like they needed to give players something to do that's action-y for the sake of advertising the game. But I would have been totally fine just fucking walking around and exploring and learning the story as, like, an immersive experience. But no, you get these combat scenarios, which are essentially little arenas in the environment. It's like, here's an environment, here's the 7 dudes, use your powers, go nuts, kill them. And it's kind of like, it's so arcade. Like, your handgun has unlimited ammo, and for the other guns, there is a limit, but there's these like unlimited ammo bags everywhere, so you don't need it anyway. And so the guys, oh yeah, and the six powers you get, they're kind of handed to you in a very linear way. Like every like third mission will give you the one you need for that mission, and then you can level them up by getting these collectibles called Chronon sources. But I'm not even sure you need to get any of those to be able to beat the game. But that's the only way to level up. You don't get experience points or anything like that. So I guess the idea is you sort of chain together different powers, and they all have a cooldown, and then you use that with the guns to take down the enemies. And the enemies get slightly more difficult as you go through the game, because the normal grunts or security guys will you can use your powers on them and they'll freeze, or they'll get stuck in a stutter and they can't move. But there are enemies later on who are equipped with like Chronon harnesses or gear, and they can also, some of them have abilities as well, so they can like jet around real quick, and they can all walk through the zero state like you can. So they're enhanced soldiers, and there's some twists on those. Some guys have shotguns, and there's like this juggernaut dude who wears armor, and you have to use your powers and get up close to him or get behind him to shoot his weak spot. But that's fine. So there's some diversity in the enemies you fight, but the weird closed off arena set pieces, you sort of keep redoing them, and you're fighting the same dudes over and over again, and it just feels like a chore, and it's not very fun. And like I said, the controls are not good. It's weird. Like 15 years ago, these guys made Max Payne, which had a very, for its time, awesome gameplay and like this really cool bullet time effects. If any game should have bullet time, it's probably the one where you're manipulating fucking time, right? Like, why didn't they put that in here? Like, I'd rather have the Max Payne controls. Just give me Max Payne in this game instead. But I don't want to keep harping on that because, yeah, the gameplay stuff is weird, and traversal stuff is weird too. Like, sometimes you can jump or climb onto an object that's like 7 foot tall, but sometimes there are obstacles like 3 feet tall, which you can't get over. It won't let you jump, or you'll jump, but your feet just won't go up, and you can't climb over it. So you have to go up to the steps and go up, and it's like, ugh, it's so unpolished. The platforming and the shooting, and even the powers to a certain extent, because sometimes the powers just don't work, or they don't go when you want them to, or and they don't like combo or mesh together, so you're not really doing cool stuff. Like when you play Dishonored, where there are also like you can sort of freeze time and like, teleport around and stuff like that, you can chain together and pull off really cool maneuvers. In this game, it's sort of like, again, it's very arcade-like. Like the actual gameplay, if it was by itself without this cool story, it'd feel like a real shitty like bargain bin Xbox 360 game. And there were a lot of those on the action front. But yeah, it's not the worst thing ever, though. It's just like unimpressive and annoying. But the story makes up for it. And like I said, thankfully there are not too many combat scenarios. Most of the gameplay is just kind of exploring and like reading stuff. And that actually is good enough on its own. So this video review's gone on longer than I wanted it to. But Quantum Break, you can read my full review on screamhead.com. I'll put a link to that in the description. But if you're at all intrigued about this game, or you love story and character-driven games, and maybe you liked Alan Wake, easy recommendation. I mean, I know it's only April, but I think this game is going to be in my game of the year list already. It has such a profound impact on me. Like I got it weeks ago, but I was delayed because I was addicted to The Division for a while. I'll put a link to my follow-up recap review of that as well. I think it's worth watching. If you're struggling with or still playing The Division, you might want to watch that video. I I think I'm done with that game for a little bit. But anyways, Quantum Break pulled me out of that funk, thank God. And once I started playing it, I could not stop. I stayed up all night one time. I played it the next day. And I don't know how long it is, but I don't know. With the 4 half-hour TV shows and me trying to get all the collectibles, I played it for a dozen hours at least, I think. I've seen some estimates that were lower than that, but I think I did put a good 12 hours into it. And I only named like 3 or 4 actors, but there are other supporting actors, a lot of familiar faces, and they're really friggin' good too. They did such a good job with that. And yeah, I really want to say more, but I don't want to get into the spoilers. But let's just say, like, I really hope this game does well, and like because they're putting it on PC as well as Xbox One, I hope Remedy can get enough sales so they can justify doing another one, because I really want to see another story in this world. Whether they can do a direct sequel or not, we'll see. But man, I really hope so. So good on you guys. I am very excited about the idea of talking to some of the writers on this game in the future, because I have so many questions, and I'm very in the mindset of this game and these characters. So Yeah, an easy recommendation. If this game interests you at all, it's a must play. And I know I shat a lot over the gameplay controls, but there is some fun to be had in the action bits. It's just not very good. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, it's there, and you can have your fun with it. And some of the powers are really cool, and again, the visuals are cool. But it's more like experiencing the story, experiencing the characters, and these environments they built, and again, I can't emphasize this enough. How they crafted the story and unfolded it the way they did is, I think I described it as like, what did I say? I think it's like it's a master lesson in like storytelling. I cannot believe they pulled it together so well. Awesome, well done. Anyways, that's it for this rambling review. If you want to see more reviews in this channel, let me know in the comment. And otherwise, like and subscribe for more unboxing videos, reviews, and just some cool gameplay videos. And I'll see you next time. Time to go to sleep.